Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the So Emotional podcast, where we talk about the emotional journey and removing the stigma and enigma around emotions so you can heal and live your life and have fun. I'm your host, Angela Wetzel. I'm a trauma-informed relationships coach. Also, your other host here is Nick Carl. He's a somatic coach. We have another very special guest today that I'm super, super excited for. And when I did his small intro on Instagram, I totally fucked up most of it, 2/3 of it. So this is John Eli Garay. Did I still say that right? I probably got it wrong, but
you said it perfectly.
Okay, stop shaking your head at me, Nick. He's like, no, you're getting it wrong. John, so what I said before, and John has a really amazing history. And what I had said was he was a priest. He is not a priest. Nick's brother was the priest that we had on before. That's brother, Father Greg. John Eli was a pastor. Then he was a coach, and then he moved into therapy. So he is now a licensed associate counselor and trauma therapist in the state of Arizona. So welcome, John Eli. Thank you so much for being here today. Yeah, I know you've had a really long day, so I really appreciate you coming on and being with us.
It's great to finally be here with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So really, I don't know if you want to dive in and kind of share your story. You're more than welcome to, but one of the things we always like to ask our guests is just when did you realize emotions were a thing, or what was your breaking point, or what was the point where it's I need to pay attention to something? I think that helps people kind of relate to our suffering in a way. People relate to suffering.
I definitely get it. I love that question. Well, way before I was ever a pastor, I was a Mexican male. Actually, I still am a Mexican male, right? Yeah, I still am. I identify as a Mexican male, culturally, and part of my journey in growing up in basically in two different cultures is there was a lack of space for emotion. I grew up in a Mexican family in the United States of America, and there's just not a lot of room for emotion, for males to be able to experience emotion. And the downside to all of that is that I'm an extremely emotional human being. So for the majority of my life, I went through it thinking there was something wrong with me. I'm a kind of person that I'll cry watching the movie Bambi, and that's just not socially acceptable for people in my household and my family. I have an amazing family, but yeah, I'm the most emotional probably out of all of them. And there was that aspect, and then add on to another layer of I grew up in a very religious household. So there was a spiritual expectation of how I ought to be consistently living a life of gratitude and a life of that was kind of void of what people call negative emotions. I ended up imploding as an adult because I hadn't addressed any of this emotional aspect of my life because there just wasn't room for it.
Yeah. Damn, I so relate to a lot of that. Me being very emotional, probably the most seemingly outwardly emotional human, also crying at any sad movie, especially Bambi. Any movie. When I was in acting school, people would look at me and they'd be like, is Angela crying? Because that's kind of the measure of if anything was happening, I was crying. I don't know if that was a good measuring stick, but you touched on so many things, and my mind kind of just went blank. But oh yeah, you talked about imploding. You don't have to go into full detail, but I'm just kind of curious of like, in your words, like what that looked like, or what was the straw that broke the camel's back?
Yeah, so I can't like pinpoint it to like one specific um, moment, but rather like it's been a journey. It's been a series of events that has really like led to me being where I'm at today. Um, Part of it was during my early adult years. I had a really um, just a really challenging time reconciling things that I experienced as a child. I am a trauma survivor myself, and one of the most easiest ways for me, because it's what was most available to me, is I really pursued faith as a means to address wounding that I had as a child. And that was pretty prevalent in my life, and still is to a degree. Uh, and I that was pretty prevalent till about my mid 30s, and then I realized that there's like another aspect that I was missing, something that was not fitting into the picture. There's a piece of the puzzle that just was missing, and that's whenever I began to like dive deep. And I have a master's of science in psychology as well as a master's of science in counseling. But I was pursuing knowledge to try to figure out what was taking place within me, and end up falling into trauma work versus in the realm of being a coach. And then I eventually pursued a degree in counseling, but it was the pursuit of trying to figure myself out that led to me eventually doing the work that I'm doing today.
Yeah.
John, one of the things you talked about is being in a family. I think that I think it's interesting and good to think about that the idea of childhood has changed. And now I'm sure it's gone through, in the thousands of years of history, right? But let's say like our parents didn't have anything that would be considered a childhood, right? As soon as you're like working age or something, you're put to work, it was my therapist today who was talking about he thought that his father resented the fact that they had childhoods, because like he didn't get anything like that at all. And so it's like, and these family of origins, and I think that I'm the same way, that like, uh, there's this whole dimensionality of all these deep feelings and deep desires that human beings have that because of how society has been structured, probably, and I can't say because there's probably pockets here and there in the ways that people touch into it. But in American society, like coming through the last couple hundred years, uh, just surviving and working your ass off like day to day was priority number one. I was hearing somebody talk about, a couple hundred years ago, like everything is in a sort of like there's small cults. But one of the key characteristics of societies hundreds of years ago is that every single person knew where they stood exactly in the sort of hierarchy and what their role was. And it's now as like our society is like evolved into what it is now, and like the structures of our families are, as we were raised in, are kind of novel, right? So the fact that like maybe your parents didn't exactly know how to support you, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because it's you can only sort of teach somebody maybe what you know, and like, and my parents the same way, like they were not given that kind of like support and space to get into and to feel deeply and to understand these deep emotional realms, right? And so, maybe we're the first generation, or in this time where like there is this like opening, there's this big opening that's happening. And so, in some ways, I'm like romanticizing this, but we're almost pioneers in a way, right? Where it's like we had the curiosity, we had the things happening in us, and we also now have the time and the ability and the information that we can start to go out and try to piece together these deep puzzles instead of lock them away, just like annex these parts of our beings and our hearts, right? Like so many of our ancestors, directly our families had to do to get by, right? That was a ramble. So it reminded me of like when you talked about your sort of like family of origin and you being, an outlier.
Absolutely. Um, so I'm gonna throw a wrench into my story real quick.
Sure.
um, my father was 61 years old whenever I was born.
Wow.
And so that not only is there's this cultural expectation that was placed on me because in Hispanic and in specifically, well, my experience coming from predominantly Mexican culture, there's not room or space for men to express emotion. That's even for those that are of a younger generation. It's still,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, a little bit more archaic.
Yeah.
Um, but specifically for me, my father was born in the United States of America. He was American born, but he was older, and he had this expectation that provider of our home and the head of our home was to teach me how to work. We had a family farm. At the age of 5, he gifted me a hoe. Not a
Yeah.
prostitute, but a hoe.
Yeah.
So I
Here
had to
you go,
clarify that
son.
really quick.
Now your purpose.
To chop down weeds, and I was gonna work in the fields with him. We planted chili, and so from the age of 5, I was introduced to be a farm laborer, and that was the expectation. And my dad very much felt and believed that he was fulfilling his role as a father to teach me how to be a good worker. And part of being a good worker also meant disconnecting from the feelings of discomfort while you're working in the summer heat.
Right.
So, different life, different time, and generations clashing at the same time.
So you were taught from an early age how to dissociate from your emotions, how to ignore the cues from your body, and how to suppress emotion.
Absolutely. That's you just worded that perfectly. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
it's just so, it's interesting, but go ahead.
yeah. So now I work in the space where I help people to understand what's taking place in their autonomic nervous system and understanding uh, what is happening within them, because there's most people that I encounter understand what's going on in their head to a certain extent, but like from the neck below, they're clueless as what is taking place. But what happens is when, as a child is growing up and as a child is experiencing life, in early childhood, there's not a vocabulary or a way to express what they're experiencing at an emotional level. So whenever a child experiences overwhelm and there's not a safe space to communicate or to receive consolation or to be soothed, what that child ends up doing is they end up compartmentalizing and shoving those emotions off to the side, because for their nervous system, it's not safe enough to deal with those things. And what ends up happening is those emotional parts end up being stored in the nervous system, and they never mature to the age that a person is living in their adult years. And what that person has done is they've learned how to dissociate from that feeling. But every once in a while, so for some people, it's not every once in a while, it's every day, every hour. Those emotional parts will surface, and they need to be addressed, and they need to be helped, they need to be consoled. They need to be interacted with in a way that is compassionate to bring regulation to the nervous system, because it's still desiring that from an earlier state in life.
Is it safe to say that it probably is, and I don't know, I'm thinking out loud, that every single person has some level of disassociation that has happened in their body and their mind system?
I believe so. And it's just the way that we learn how to cope. And some of us, well, even if you think about it, I was reading a study a while back, gosh, when I first started grad school, about like men, and their ability to be able to communicate with others. And the study was showing that most men, to be able to be at a place of ease, to be able to communicate emotions, even at a bar or wherever they wanted to have a drink. That's why men usually end up going to a bar or someplace where there's alcohol, because there has to be some level of numbing, some level of not being able to feel, to actually communicate what they feel. And so even if it's not something that our autonomic nervous system is doing for us, you'll find human beings looking for ways to dissociate in order to process what's actually taking place in front of them.
You're so right, because what's interesting is like most humans do require some form of social lubricant, or yeah, like something to ease that social anxiety of like showing up and being seen for who they are. So when we enter into these social spaces, whether it's a bar or a club or whatever, it's like people are like, let's go get fucked up and then have fun, as opposed to let's like put ourselves out there. Because I think the vast majority of people didn't have that regulating adult. And as you know, and like, well, all of us know here, but maybe those listening don't know that children cannot self-regulate. So when we have those parts inside of us that are active, and when we are enmeshed in those parts, we actually cannot self-regulate from inside those parts. So we're literally like children that need that co-regulation without necessarily having the skill set to know how to help like co-regulate in a healthy way, or regulate ourselves, which is like fucking wild. Like it's wild when you really think about it. It's a little scary actually. When I think about it, I'm like, oh my God. Right?
Yeah, I remember being a kid, and like my dad would say, like, los hombres no lloran, which means like men don't cry, boys don't cry. And so like as I grew up, and I'd feel shame, I'd feel embarrassed and like disgust for myself for crying for everything. Even whenever I was mad, I'm one of those people that cries whenever I'm angry as well. And then I'd get like even more shame. I'd be angry for being angry. I feel shame for feeling shame. And as I went into my adult years, what my nervous system was needing was that co-regulation. It was needing a safe space to be able to express itself. And the safe space didn't exist. And so part of my work as an adult has been providing that space for myself to be able to feel freely, and to find more adaptive ways to express emotion, and to be able to relate to that emotion in a healthy way.
Ooh, can you give us some examples of that? Because that sounds like interesting, juicy.
Yeah. So, what emotions are a biological response to a stimulus, and that stimulus can be in your environment, it can be within yourself, it can be between autonomic nervous systems, so between you and another human being. And what an emotion does is it provides information. Like we have a tendency of as a human race to label emotions as being good or bad, and we want to like always be like experiencing like the ones that are viewed as being positive emotions, like happiness, joy, and being content. But it's also equally important for us to allow ourselves to experience any other emotion that shows up. If fear is present, there's a reason for it. You know, and it's best to learn to not judge the emotion, but to recognize its presence and to ask, like, why are you here?
Mm.
If shame is present, why is shame present? Is it if it's present, it's there for a reason. I sat in a moment a while back, and one client said, "You know what? I feel great because they didn't say I felt great. They said, I'm learning how to be okay with shame. And like, I just like want to stand up and start like clapping my hands and applauding, because for once in their life, they were being liberated from the chains of shame. Like, shame is here for a reason. Like, let's explore that. Let's be curious why it's here. I didn't learn how to fully experience and express anger until I was headed towards my 40s. And now, whenever I'm angry, instead of judging myself, I'm like, okay, why is anger here? Oh, I realize this person's behavior is like really pissing me off right now. And it's not aligned with my core beliefs and my values. And maybe I need to take a step back and analyze how I want to interact with this person moving forward. Because obviously these behaviors are introducing dysregulation to my nervous system. Do I need to have a conversation? Do I need to create space between me and that person? Do I need to take an action?
Mm.
Sounds like you're
How do
working
you
on
work this?
boundaries.
Absolutely. But you know what? A lot of people will just set boundaries without ever thinking about it and wondering why. What's the emotion that is creating the boundaries?
There's an author we had on a couple of weeks ago, Carla McLaren, and she talked about emotions as a type of cognition. And I really like that. It was like, this is just another way that your body takes in information. And so she talked about not valencing, right? Don't get into this sort of like good, bad. It's just information. And it's different. And I like to think about it just in frequencies. They're frequencies. Yes, there are frequencies that I hear in my ears that are unpleasant. And some of those, some of the emotions can be the same way. Not valencing them, but giving that open space and trying to give respect and receive the information, because they all come with information.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's interesting, like with emotions or even with boundaries, it's like, I think in investigating them, sometimes you can realize that they can come from a like proactive place, or they can come from a reactive place. And knowing, like, I think one of the biggest things that I learned that's just like coming up in my brain now is about like, yes, listening to the emotions, but having discernment to say, yes, this is here for a reason. Is this like a I don't know, like a shame core or an anger core, like something that I've actually energetically taken on as a belief system or as an identity from my family. And then if I'm having this trigger, it's like, yes, the emotion's there. The emotion doesn't actually tell the truth. It is a truth, but it doesn't necessarily tell the truth about the situation in context, because it's adding a subjective layer to something that is objective, right? So then it's like, why is there this emotional interpretation that's happening here? And I think that is a really kind of fuzzy, strange place that we can wind up in with emotions, because yes, they are always pointing us towards something. And I do believe if you can decipher them correctly, they will always point you to your deeper truth. But if we take them at face value and be like, yeah, this makes sense, and they're correct, like, and that person's an asshole and they're pissing me off, then it's like, then I'm not actually getting the message, but I'm sort of taking those emotions and just making meaning at like a surface level.
Absolutely. There's two things that came to mind as you were sharing that. One of them is Deb Dana's famous quote, "Story always follows fate."
Oh yeah.
Like that's, you know, the flavor of our story is going to be based on what we are experiencing in our body due to our environment. And the other thing that came to my mind is I have a connection that I have from my blogging days and also from Instagram. Dr. Andrea Donardo, I believe she's based out of Ontario. She's pretty amazing, but she says emotions never lie, but the intensity of them can. And that's always made me take a step back and think, because our emotions are going to tell the truth, but the intensity of them is going to influence the flavor of the story that we begin to create in our minds. I've also, I think it's important to identify like where emotions come from. And if you can think of it as this, I found this to be very helpful. Emotions are what we emote. If you think of your face as being an emoji, like whenever you're happy, you smile, like that's an emotion. Like whenever you're sad, like you might frown a little bit. Emotions are going to be what is visible through our body language and through our facial expression. And what they are is they're an interpretation of our feelings that are taking place in our mind. And so our feelings, that's what's in our brain, but what that is, it's an interpretation of what's taking place in our body, because our autonomic nervous system is always looking for those cues of safety and danger within our environments and within ourselves and between us and other people. And if we're not aware of what's taking place in here, our feelings will be misaligned, as well as what we emote into the world.
So this gets me into just like thinking about like that quote from I forget the name, Andrea, the Canadian lady.
Oh, Andrea Donardo. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, if a person has like a history of like betrayal or like infidelity or something like that, right? Or if you're pursuing a growth edge and then you have fear come up because you're actually entering into the unknown, it's like these places become really sticky because the intensity of those emotions, or even like the presence of those emotions, may indicate that you're leaving your comfort zone of what has been safe and familiar, and that something maybe new is happening, or something has happened in your environment that's just triggering like fears from the past. So then it's like trying to figure out like what's really happening, or because like the emotions will try to like our parts basically will try to predict the future all day long, but we'll try to predict the future by basically dragging the past into it and being like, it's going to happen again. Here it is. He's doing the thing again, or she's doing the thing again. Or, you know, this is where we have to move in with mom because we tried to pursue this, I don't know, business idea, and there's something happening in the space. So I think when I hear quotes like that, where it's like emotions don't lie, but the intensity lies, how would you just recommend like to our audience of how to work with those kinds of situations, like how to apply that logic?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to start by saying there's like not an easy fix to that. I believe that the best thing that we ought to do as human beings is to develop a level of sense of self-awareness. And in that, I'm really huge on I did it as a coach, I do it as a therapist, is really helping people map out their autonomic nervous system and to understand how they respond to their day-to-day environments. You see, our autonomic nervous system, it stores everything that has taken place in our life since the moment that we were conceived. Everything is stored in the memory of our nervous system, even if it's not stored in our brain. And the reality is that it's going to, well, it's always looking for cues of safety or danger. But whenever we have experienced severe amounts of overwhelm, our nervous systems they begin to be shaped into a state of protection in such a way that we are completely unaware of any glimmer of safety and hope and future and all the beautiful good things that life has to offer. Because that overwhelming moment, I think you mentioned infidelity. Whenever someone goes through something that is as traumatic as infidelity, their nervous system may become shaped in such a way that every relationship, everything that they approach is viewed through the lens of that trauma. And it doesn't make that person a bad person. It doesn't mean that there's no hope for them. But what literally has to be done is that person has to begin to hold space for their nervous system and honor the fact that it's aware of the danger, but also train their nervous system to be aware of the glimmers that will bring them back into back into their window of tolerance, into a ventral vagal state where they feel safe, where they feel connected, and they're able to move with ease. Being in your window of tolerance doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be doing backflips and jumping around with pom poms or anything. It just means that you're okay to live life, and it's okay to just be that okay. I know there's a lot of people that will say like it's okay to not be okay. That's true, but there's some people that don't believe that it's okay to just be okay. They think it's either you're down in the dumps or like you're on this high roller coaster ride. There's that safe place in the middle that is just okay, and that's all right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I met someone who was like, yeah, I'm just okay. And I'm like, oh, just okay. And they're like, yeah, I'm just okay. Is that okay? And I was like, yes, it is. I was just checking in, So it's interesting. It's like fighting for the territory. But also the other thing that's interesting is like sometimes because of trauma, being in a good place or having happy emotions can then be tied with trauma. So then it sends like happy feelings send cues of danger to your nervous system because of, like those, like if you look at the first like Batman movie where he's walking with his parents and it's like this happy, joyful moment. And this is when the Joker like comes and fucking murders his parents and like steals the mom's pearl necklace and there's pearls everywhere. And it's like, I think this is a natural human thing where we probably all have some form of trauma that's taken place in this what we thought was like a container of safety or we thought was a safe place. Like being violated in that safe place makes it so much more challenging to be able to like find that sense of homeostasis where it's okay to be okay, it's okay to be happy, and it's okay to not be okay too. Like all those places.
Absolutely. A lot of the people that end up working with, they have experienced trauma from a primary caretaker or from a very close family member, religious leader, etc. And what ends up happening, what's so detrimental is because in these spaces, there's usually a sense of life and laughter and fun and community, and there's all this good, and then there's this huge violation that takes place. And those nervous systems really find it difficult to balance out, to define that what happened was a very horrible event and should never have happened, and while still holding place for the good things, because they can begin to shame themselves for the good that they experienced in the midst of the bad. And sometimes you'll find people even in adult years playing out or giving into maladaptive behaviors that mimic the trauma that they experienced in the past, because in the midst of that trauma, the horrific things that were taking place, there was also the good. And so the nervous system can sometimes hold on to, like, not know the difference. And that's whenever we have to really come clear, identify which part of us is holding that trauma, finding out what that need is for that part, and also to reorient that part to teach them that we're no longer that age where the trauma occurred. We are an adult, and this is 2023. There's so many things, like for me, like one of the things that I have to remind myself is that it's not 1985 anymore. And so that's one thing that I have to remind myself whenever I find myself triggered by the trauma of my past is, John, it's 2023. You live in Mesa, Arizona. You're no longer in New Mexico. It's not 1985. You're married to a beautiful wife. You live in a beautiful home, and you have agency over your life. I have to speak to those parts and remind them of who I am today.
Really makes me think of that movie with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, 50 First Dates, where if you see him as like consciousness or higher self or capital S self, it's like we need to be that person that's pursuing the parts of us that have gotten lost in illusion or that have forgotten. And what he does in that movie is like makes her that video so that she can play it every morning, and she has all of her emotional reactions from what happened in the past because she's getting caught up again. And I don't think our parts are exactly like that. Like we don't have that kind of amnesia, but still it's like finding those pockets of unconsciousness or like in our subconscious that are seeking the light, that are still living in the shadows, that really desperately need to be witnessed to. Like, hey, good news. It's not that shitty moment anymore. Like time has passed and these are better days and we have agency here.
So,
Absolutely.
John, I don't want to conflate the thing, but what lit up in my brain when you were talking about that is some bit of like a repetition compulsion when there's good and bad mixed together, you know? And so it made me think about sexual kink then. That is maybe one of the ways it could be played out down the line. Are we in the same ballpark or?
So I want to be very I want to tread that line very
Sure.
carefully. Yes, because there's people who find enjoyment in that, and I definitely, it is not my intention to ever want to shame someone for, the way that they enjoy to experience, to express themselves sexually.
Right.
However, you can find people who experience pain sexually because of assault, looking to replay that.
Yeah.
And it's what I would hate for any of your listeners to do if they do hear this is to automatically think that someone that's into kink, to think that every person that's into kink is doing so out of abuse. But nevertheless, there are some people that will replay that. You will also find it's common for somebody that I'll give an example, like someone that is heterosexual that perhaps was abused by someone of the same sex might pursue same-sex sexual experiences, not out of the fact that they are homosexual, but it is replaying part of what took place in the past.
There's something I was talking with my guy today about my own repetition, and one of the things that happened throughout my life is that I left home, but then somehow I was like gravitationally like drawn to come back to my house of origin and be around like my family. And we were kind of digging into it, and I think it's something of the same thing. It's like there's still part of me that wants something there. There was part of me that was injured there, but there's also part of me that has a lot of goodness there too. But there's something deep inside of me is bringing me back to this place to sort of do it again, or it's looking for something, which is a very deep and kind of tricky thing that our brains and beings and nervous systems do, that want to find resolution, right? And sometimes when you can't do it out in the world or you can't do it in your mind, it's like the Carl Jung, if unless you make conscious, you'll just call it fate. Your fate will lead you back into these places or back into these scenarios that we won't always be conscious of the reasons why we're there or what's trying to come to life through us. And that stuff is very tricky. And honestly, I think even to the layperson or to me, when I see it around or see it in places, it seems wild that actually happens. But I just think it is a testament to the amount of consciousness that lives in our bodies and that can compel us to do these things. And so to me, that's like that's just a bigger and deeper reason for us to be exploring these things to be in communication with these parts of ourselves, and to give, to do that work like you talked about, to try to become conscious and aware of ourselves, so that if we can get really intimate with ourselves, then we can kind of start to you start to sniff things out. You're like, oh, why did I do that? That was an interesting little thing there, and you can I don't know, just not be led around by your nose so much, or as much as less as possible.
That I sense like the way that you return home, your desire to return home, and then wondering what's going on here. Many times I relate that to like the way that I express faith now. And I haven't been a pastor for 13 years. However, with that, and there's many reasons why. I've witnessed exploitation. I've witnessed like religious control. I've witnessed a lot of ugly things that have been done in the name of religion, and also a lot of beautiful things too, like community and support. And what I've had to do is just reevaluate, what is it, whenever I was there, what was I seeking?
Mm-hmm.
What did I experience? What do I want to take with me in the future? What is resonating with my nervous system and what is not? So I was part of a religious movement. That there's actually some documentaries on Hulu right now that are currently coming out. No, I wasn't in it, but I was a musician.
Hulu.
That was part of that movement, and so like I know currently right now that if I step into a church and if it's dark and if there's smoke machines being used, which to me even it sounds ridiculous, me saying that out loud, that churches have are completely dark and smoke machines. Yeah. I'm completely triggered. Like I will experience anxiety. And so I've had to realize that that is something that my nervous system is not currently accepting, and that's okay. I look for religious spaces where there is light in the room, and where there's not like a how would I say it, like a celebrity figure in front of everyone. I want to interact with human beings. The celebrity status of religious figures literally makes me want to hurl now. Like I can feel myself wanting to gag whenever I see people revering people in a spiritual, slutty way.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
John, I'm interested. We've had a couple of conversations in talking about the nervous system, sympathetic, fight, flight, fawn, maybe parasympathetic, depression, about where freeze fits into the picture. And freeze, when I think about full freeze, I think about shock, right? You're in a car wreck. You're just dazed. You can't even move, can't speak. I think that's also a form of freeze. But humans have the wonderful ability to not be in shock, but still be in some sort of some type of nervous system level of freeze. Am I off base on that?
I want to make sure that I'm understanding you. Are you asking if there's a way to have like some of the energy from being in a freeze state and still be able to interact with the world around you?
Yeah. Is there low levels of freeze?
So I think what you're referring to is called play. And so if we were to label like each state, I love the way it's like described in polyvagal theory. It's described as a ladder. On the top, there's a feeling of being safe and calm. At the top of the ladder, that is what we call the ventral vagal state. If you slide down the ladder, if your nervous system senses danger, you slide down it. And you fall into a sympathetic state, which is flight or fight. Mm-hmm. If what your nervous system is sensing as danger, if it is resolved, you will automatically go back up to a ventral state because you feel secure once again. But if the overwhelm of being in flight or fight is too much for you to handle, you fall all the way down the ladder into a dorsal state, which is shut down. Now, sometimes you you're kind of like stuck between states. Like you feel the need, your nervous system feels the need to move, but also it's also feeling a need to conserve energy. So you get stuck in between sympathetic and dorsal. That's the state of freeze. However, we naturally need a state of safety and a state of sympathetic energy to do certain things. For example, to play sports, you need to have that flight or fight. Like
Right.
I'm totally sports illiterate, so I might butcher what I'm trying to explain here, okay? But what I see on the television, like whenever someone's running around the football field, um, they need a certain sense of like reptilian activation to be able to dodge
Heightened
people.
awareness. Yeah.
Yes, heightened awareness. You labeled that perfectly. And meanwhile, still also feeling safe because that's their zone. So like that's a state of play.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and kids playing hide and seek. I'm my wife has a granddaughter that's about to be 3 next month, and she's like learning how to play hide and seek now, and it's so cute to watch her. And you can see that anxious energy that she has, like as she's like seeking or she's hiding, and the element of surprise, and then the way she reaches out to my wife. She calls her Gigi, like Gigi, and gives a big hug. There's that state of safe connection still, while there's that play element involved of nervousness, because that flight or fight is needed. Just a flavor of that energy to be able to interact.
I wonder, Nick, were you kind of talking about the place that is like below sympathetic and not fully in dorsal? That's like that
Look,
spot of feeling
I'm thinking
activated.
about what happens in my own brain. Look, this is completely selfish, but I've been curious. It's just like being very fuzzy brained, like just fuzziness is how I describe it. And I always thought it was, to me, what it felt like, it was just like that I have a ton of sympathetic energy, like my body's full of energy, but it just washes over me in this kind of like milkiness. And it's like, so I don't know. I felt like, I don't know if I've ever been in a totally frozen state, like catatonic or like in shock of a car accident. Like it's not into there, which is another realm. This is just something where it's like, I feel my body is full of energy, right? Full of sympathetic energy. But the sensation is one of just like being dazed.
Like spinning, right? Like a
Yeah.
little spinny where it's like you're activated, but you're not really able to do
Yeah.
anything.
It's like
You're
the
so
sympathetic activation, but nothing's happening really. And so I guess this is a mixture of, it's just a mixture of, gas pedal and brakes, sympathetic and parasympathetic, and probably everybody's, manifestation of that is probably slightly different, or, and the different mixtures of all those, chemicals in your brain and each individual brain's reacting is probably a little bit different.
The question that I would have for you is, are you okay with that?
No, no,
Okay.
no, because for me, it's not generative. It's not
Yeah.
productive. It ends up being, I just feel like it's a cul-de-sac. Now, what I did was that I did work with a guy in Arizona. We did a lot of somatic experiencing, right? And so a lot, like when I was in safety of connection, right? So I didn't go to the bar, we didn't drink. I just sat with somebody and we agreed that he was just going to be there for me he was going to be there for me, which I didn't know how powerful connection is for people. It's extremely powerful. And what I see, what it did for my nervous system is and it didn't take long. It took 5 minutes or something, that my nervous system just took one little step down into relaxing. And I was in my body, not spun out in my thoughts, which is what was my safe place to go. And in those moments, like waves of energy, just emotional, physiological energy started coming up out of my body. And it was a wild feeling, wild feeling. We did that for months, and I just called it the freeze feeling. I didn't know what to call it because it was kind of fuzzy. Well, we just went with that. We did that for months. And then somewhere along the line, after months and months of this, I was like, I stopped during a session once and I was just like, hey, I'm just like, is this all we're going to do? Because this feels like nothing. And he's just like, it sounds like you're a little bit frustrated there. Let's be with the feeling of frustration. And to me, it was just like, what a novel. I was like, yes, let's do that. Okay, so all right, I'm frustrated. I'm like, okay, I'm frustrated. I'm going to be with frustration. Here we go. And dude, in like 2 seconds, it was like, no, I'm not a little frustrated. I am explosion. I mean, just this internal thing of just like white hot fire. And I think what I'm touching into is some like what we talked about is our ability to take these things totally unmet, these frustrations, whatever it had happened to me, and it just gets set aside. And so me with my eyes closed in my mind's eye, it was down in my left hip. And it just like opened up and presented itself to me as white hot magma fire under 10,000 psi. And it was just like, it was like, holy shit. No wonder why I'm a little bit bent out of shape, why I'm a little bit nutty. It's like this stuff is in here and it's real. Mm-hmm. And it was outside of my mind's eye. It was outside of my, and so that it was a testament to me, like, of the power of our beings to protect us, that has all these dimensions and realms that we're not given light switch access to. It's not just take a look and, oh, there it is. It's not that simple. We're more dynamic than that, which I think is like a message that I try to tell people, anybody who will listen, is that like you as a being are way cooler than you think that you are. There's way more happening inside of you, that you, like there's so much, it's like everything is known under the sun. It's like bullshit. No. You're very complicated, like wonderfully complicated, not overly like, for complication's sake. It's like there's systems in you that are working and are pretty cool. Anyway, another rant. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. I'm having a ranting day. I
have some thoughts, but I feel like John has things to say, so I will defer.
Oh, not. I just think that's an awesome experience. Well, one thing I would share is, and I probably should give a disclaimer at the beginning of this, is that none of what I'm sharing today ought to be considered to be a form of therapy. Is a conversation, but our autonomic nervous system has different needs, and if you think about like the way that you nourish your soul, I mean, you nourish your body, like you have to have like vegetables, there has to be fruit, some source of protein, like there's specific nourishment that your body needs, and there's certain times that your body might desire specific foods. There's sometimes, I don't know why, but my body craves sugar snap peas. I think they're like the most disgusting thing on the face of the planet. But whenever I eat them, they're like crack for me. I'm like so happy. I don't know what it does, if it's the chlorophyll or what, but it does something inside of me. And the reason why I'm giving this example is because there's so many different modalities of therapy and just goodness for your soul, and for you and your perfect, as you are working on yourself. And somatic experiencing is a powerful form of therapy, and it's also used in coaching. But there's also there might be a season of your life where you might want to explore maybe a little bit more of parts work or EMDR. I'm really big on reality therapy. I don't use reality therapy so much on people who have experienced a severe amount of trauma.
Yeah.
But it's very powerful for people who find themselves just stuck and not knowing what choice to make next.
Is structural disassociation therapy in there too?
Yeah, so that's the basis of the work that I do in the intensive outpatient program that I work.
Oh, okay.
Structural dissociation theory. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Sorry, Angela.
No, well, when you said reality therapy, what did you mean by that? Because I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, so it's a cognitive approach. It's not the same as CBT, but it's the work of William Glasser with choice theory. And basically, the premise behind that is that the only thing that we have power over in this world, in this lifetime, is over our own choice. We can attempt to try to influence others, but the reality is that we have no power over anyone else. The only thing that we can do is to choose our choice. And so there's the understanding through that that all of our choices that we make in life are they serve the purpose of fulfilling a biological need of either security, love and belonging, power, freedom, or fun. And so it's really identifying what need we are looking to fulfill in our lives. And many times the point we find ourselves stuck and frustrated, it's because we have a need and we're barking up the wrong tree trying to get it met. And there's another place in our life where we could make maybe a more fulfilling choice to get that need met. If your nervous system is craving love and belonging, uh, it's not gonna be happy till it finds it. I'll share up a personal level. I couldn't find love and belonging in celebrity Christianity. Like that just like I couldn't find my place. It just uh, didn't happen for me. I have found love and belonging in really meeting people who we share the same goals, values, and most of these friendships are not found meeting underneath the roof of a building once a week. And I could never find that love and belonging. Meanwhile, I was barking up the wrong tree.
Mm. So I love all this. And Nick, when you were sharing, it really made me think about the emotional ladder and also how we move from like the freeze states or dorsal vagal like in through sympathetic. And one of the things that I've witnessed a lot again and again, and even I think in my own journey, I had a very adversarial relationship with anger, with my own anger. And the quote, Joseph Campbell's quote, the cave you most fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And it's like there's gold there. And I feel like what I've seen a lot, and because most of the people that I work with are in the very least, they're disorganized. At the most, well, they're usually fearful avoidance. And it's because that's a unique set of trauma that happens, right? And so I do find the vast majority of my clients do fall into the fearful avoidant, that category. It's also because it's what I've healed through, and it's what like it's what my nervous system went through, which was fucking wild to heal because it actually meant I had to walk back through the path of fear again and again and experience like that in my body. And that was the thing, that was one of the things I least wanted to feel because I grew up feeling afraid all of the time. But I think what happens is, that quote, it's like Henry David Thoreau, where he says, like, we end up living this life of quiet desperation. And I feel like some of those states in between freeze and sympathetic, where it's neither, it's like in this wasteland of we're not fucking frozen, but we're not doing anything, I think can be so frustrating because it's like that two sides of the coin. Like I move from anxiety to depression, anxiety to depression, anxiety to depression. And why it's like, why do people bounce back and forth? And I truly believe it's denial of that gateway emotion. I feel like there are two major gateways for emotion, one being anger and finding a way to really like feel that and release it, because if not, you'll hit that ceiling and you'll bounce down. You won't maybe go all the way down, but you're not going up. And there is something that we need to like break through and really feel the full like injustice, the rage, like all of the pain. And it's messy. For me, it was incredibly scary. to feel my anger and to feel as though, like, I really felt like I needed a container and a space for someone to hold that for me. And I found that in different ways to start expressing, but it definitely didn't feel safe. And I found that the more I expressed my anger, and also my coping mechanisms around that was to laugh at it too, because that's, like, I was nicknamed Private Smiley in the military because when I would get screamed at, I would laugh. That was my way of dissociating and having that moment of catharsis. I got dropped all the fucking time. I got big biceps from doing that. And they were just like Private Smiley. And this one guy like knew that he could literally yell at me and I would break. I would just laugh. And it was like, that was how I dealt with terror. That was my way of dissociating or finding a way around it. And if I wasn't laughing, I was crying, because it was like, you know, crying was acceptable, anger was not acceptable. And so it's like, I think sometimes these emotional limitations that come to us can be generational, or they can be ours, depending on how we were traumatized, or our relationship to those emotions do tell a story. Like, I believe everything is about relationships. And it's like, anytime we have a relationship with any aspect of our emotions that is not fully based in that compassionate, courageous, creative, that 8C's higher self place, then that is an imposter, or that is not an imposter, but it's another part of us pretending to be conscious and judging those emotions. And then what is under judgment, or what we judge, it cannot be understood, cannot be fully felt, and cannot be liberated. So I just feel like it's so easy to get stuck in these spaces, just because there's so much shit there. There's so much, I don't know, it's like a minefield, I think, sometimes, when it comes to the trauma, like the fucking shit around the emotions, you know? So I just, all that came up, and I just wanted to share it because I've seen it again and again. The other gateway that I mentioned or didn't mention is boredom. And this has come up in Abraham Hicks' work, because, and then also I was speaking to someone and she referenced Mark Gaffney's work, The Cosmoerotic Universe. And he said, what's interesting about boredom is when we get to that place, he said, what do? We do an avoid dance, because it's like a void. And instead of like being in the space of like nothingness, we're like, fuck, let me get out of this. And we can dip back down into dissatisfaction. But if we can be in the void and approach it with curiosity and excitement and possibility, like the wonder of the unknown, as opposed to the terror of the unknown, then we can actually flip up into satisfaction. So I become very curious anytime I see emotional stagnation or patterns of this repeated back and forth. It almost looks like someone who's getting ready to jump off the diving board, and there's something needed, there's support needed around that emotion or that thing to break through and go to the next level. So there is, I believe, something there in it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in and say something and I was hoping that I wouldn't interrupt you, because what you're saying was super profound. But you talked about like how you'd use laughter to dissociate, and it made me think, like, Nick, whenever you're sharing your experience of feeling an emotion and then feeling the milkiness and the cloudiness that would come up with that. And one of the things that is common for me to see with clients is clients who are experiencing an autonomic response to their environment, be it a conversation. We do group therapy a lot over here. And so with that, sometimes people share things that trigger their emotions, trigger experiences if there's a similarity. And what you see sometimes is people just zoning out and dissociating. And it's not that they're intentionally trying to like ignore or to be a jerk or to not be present, but that's what their nervous system has learned to protect them. There's a protector part that is saying it's not safe to feel this sympathetic energy right here at this moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove you from it.
Right.
And I would recommend that you unpack that with a professional.
The other thing here though is actually my brain immediately went to the tantrum phase of childhood. So when toddlers, like, well, there's a whole lot of psychological development, like individuation, like all kinds of things happening, right? It's complicated. It's like the no phase, right? But I remember listening to the series, like The Wisdom of Trauma had this great like expert panel, and Dr. Kapoor Mate was talking to Sia, the singer, and she like unpacked this like brilliant thing of like all like the 6 different phases that a child will go through when they try to get attention or they try to get their needs met. It was like the first one was like, hey, and then when like that didn't get the response, then they look confused. They're like, what's happening? Like, am I not, can you not hear me? Can you not see me? And then it's like, then it escalates into more like higher bids for attention, right? Again and again. So it's this repeated process. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. Finally, we get to the tantrum. The tantrum is that child's like nuclear option. I gotta fucking do something. No one's listening to me. Fucking help me. But if you have parents that have like some kind of oppositional or adversarial relationship to anger, or like no, like the tyranny of the toddler, you will listen to me. I do not bow down to you, you silly toddler, some whatever shit, whatever that comes from. It's trauma, it's stuff, right? But in that moment of need, being completely punished, abandoned, rejected, as your last desperate hope for some form of connection or attention, that kind of anger response being met with so much just like from being rejected or being pushed away, then it's like, then we learn to disown our anger. Then it's like, anger is not something that is safe to be felt or expressed. Then it would make sense to have protector parts come in and go, you will not express that anger ever, because that's how you fucking die. You will get left on the side of the road. Mom and dad are like, see you later. You're whatever. I don't like start improvising and saying a bunch of stuff, but it's like, damn. Like when you think about the children that were raised in that Dr. Spock era of, us, well, yes, a lot of us, of let the baby cry, do not let the toddler, do not let them control you. We have that on one end, and on the other end, we have children that are abusing their parents emotionally, physically, because there's no boundaries being set and there's absolutely no guidance. So we have like we're like running the gamut of these extremes where it's like really fucked up, but it's also really challenging to unpack. Like what is appropriate? How do we respond to these things? So that was the other thing that came up too, where it's just like, damn. And that happened to me too. Like I had a lot of stuff, like I threw many tantrums, I do know. And my mother would walk away from me and she would just threaten to abandon me. And I would come out of it, but I never got those needs met. And so it's like there's unmet needs there underneath whatever is happening. And I think that can be true for a lot of us, where it's just like, damn, that's cold. Right?
Cold.
Stone cold.
No, part of my experience, as a child in Mexican culture, the things that you hear about all the time are la chancla and the cinto. The chancla is the sandal. So whenever you misbehave or there's inappropriate behavior, throwing a tantrum, expressing an emotion, it's very common that you'd get hit with the sandal, or the cinto, that's the belt. You know that you'd get a whooping. For mom, it was either going to be a chancla. For dad, it was going to be the cinto. And that's still prevalent to today. Like people don't allow their children to express emotion. And so it gets stuck and they end up dealing with it as an adult.
And deal they will, or will not. How is being a therapist treating you, John? How's that journey been?
I absolutely love it. It's
Really?
it. It's so I worked in higher education for about 13 years, and I've worked as an academic counselor and enrollment representative, and I also had a part-time gig as a coach. I love the work that I did as a coach as well. Um, However, being able to wake up in the morning and to hold space for people at a deep level that are working through some of the most uh, darkest, most painful moments of their life is a privilege. It's an honor. And I have the privilege of working with a team of amazing people that are just as passionate about this as I am, that are inspiring to work with. Uh, I work at a place where like the owners will like walk up and greet me with a smile, sit down and ask me about my day. I haven't had an owner of a company do that ever. So it's just amazing to be part of that and to be part of the healing journey of the specific demographic of people that I work with. I feel like I'm part of a team, and perhaps I found that sense of belonging that I've been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cool too to be part of like a group of like helpers, like genuine helpers. Like we're here to have a space to like help human beings deal with the suffering that is inherent in being alive, you know? And that's what this whole building and our whole endeavor is for. I mean, like that sounds pretty cool.
It
Hey,
feels great.
John Eli, so the migration generally has been therapist coach, and you're one of the only coaches that I know of that has migrated from coach into therapist. And you just from being online and the social media world where there's a lot of contention between therapists and coaches, even some pages dedicated to bashing one or anyway. But what is do you have some perspective, just like having traversed in that direction? Yeah, like what are some insights that you
Yeah. There is this famous quote by Taylor Swift that says, haters gonna hate. Bashers gonna bash. So here's the deal. I'm gonna break it down to you. And I know some of these people. They're people who I love and who I respect, and they're doing a powerful work. But whenever you are licensed by an entity, by a state board, there's a certain set rules that you have to set. And there's boundaries that don't allow you to use specific modalities. And especially a lot of the people that I see stepping out of like clinical practice into coaching, they usually involve like a spiritual component to that. And that's not part of therapy either. It's not something that the state board is really fond of. So, and that's also a challenge for me because there's a lot of times that, like I said, faith is a huge part of my life. I'm like, I wish I could say something, but I can't. And I work with a lot of people that deal with spiritual and religious trauma. So I have to restrain myself and recognize that I have a box that I operate in. And there's also the aspect of freedom whenever it comes uh, to the amount of money you can make as a therapist as you can make to a coach. You can make a decent, salary as a coach, whereas a therapist, you're confined to what insurance will pay if you accept insurance. So I recognize I could probably be making a lot more money as a coach and impacting people in a different way. But specifically, the people that I want to be working with, um, in a clinical sense, I work with people who have a high level of dissociation, and I even work with clients who have DID, dissociative identity disorder, and so that's not something that I would ever do at the level of being a coach. Like if I'm going to be stepping into that realm and I'm working specifically to treat a diagnosis, then that's what I'm going to be doing. But there's pros and cons to both. And like I said, I know some amazing people that are doing amazing work. And Angela knows I've reached out to her beforehand. I'm like, hey, I know you're a coach, but I need like your I need to pick your brain on attachment theory today. I have a client that I need that I'm having a difficult time explaining something. How would you explain this? In the realms of attachment theory. So I've kind of used Angela as a resource for attachment theory, and I've loved that.
I gotta say, I have so much love for people in the therapy world because I feel like it's such a calling, and in a way it is like being in the trenches with people. And not that we're not all to some degree. I mean, I've held a lot of space for some very dark things. And with my coaching clients, like they've come with all kinds of trauma, sexual, religious, spiritual, financial, just abuse, like domestic violence, a lot of things. And usually not always in an active state, like healing from the past, but there's a large gamut of things that I end up covering because it is the world of emotions. But like I truly do love, like, to me, I'm like therapists and coaches, like I'm like we're on the same team. I think we can really help each other, and I love it when therapists follow me and they repost my stuff, and I love following therapists, and I think that we can really learn from each other. And I don't really believe in scarcity. I believe that people are called to us, like those that were meant to help and heal. And when they say like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I think that as humans, like we're here to help each other. So I really,
Yeah, human suffering in short supply. This just in.
yeah, like I think we'll all have something to do for the rest of our lives. So
Absolutely.
there's plenty to go around, and like and also like I think there are so many fantastic there are shamsters and people that suck in every modality and every space, and there's
Every
people
direction.
that are amazing. What's that? Yeah, there's people that are amazing, and so it's like no need to shit on one or the other. It's like there's people doing brilliant work and there's people that kind of suck, and usually we're moving through on our healing journey. We kind of start to learn what's what feels good, who feels supportive to me, what modalities work for my nervous system, what doesn't work, what are my boundaries, what do I want to pay for, what don't I want to pay for, like all those things.
I lost you there for a bit. Sorry.
Oh, anyway, yeah, I was just kind of like riffing on like there's something for everyone. But I'm kind of marveling at your ability to hold space for people and not really talk about like spirituality in a way, or at least like there maybe being a higher purpose. But I also get in some places where there's just so much trauma still, and there's that victimization energy, and I don't use that saying that victimization is a bad place to be, because I really feel like that energy is necessary when we don't have the resources to really be there and experience like needing help and getting support and really figuring out what happened and making sense and integrating. But it's like sometimes like the last thing people really want to hear about is like this happened for a reason. It's like whoa, that is not the fucking time. Like now it's like feeling all the emotions that are here, and then like maybe at some point when you find that natural place of like evolution, and you start to feel forgiveness and you start to kind of recognize, then you get to make your own meaning out of that silver lining. So I can also like, in some ways I'm like, that must be really challenging. In other ways, I also completely understand that it can be really tricky to try to bring in religion or spirituality, especially when you have experienced abuse in those systems, like so many people have, like in the name of like I know someone who's like one of their former partners just would use the Bible to justify abuse, right? And a lot of people do and have. And if you look at the Spanish Inquisition and all those things, it's like killing in the name of religion, killing, maiming, torturing, all kinds of things. And it's like, yikes.
Absolutely.
What
All
chapter
of that.
what chapter in the Bible was thou shalt beat thy wife or something.
There's none that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Like people use that like spare the rod, spoil the child thing
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot. But and I don't think there's a direct biblical thing that says that. But I do think that, like, earlier, John Eli, you said that like our state will always, or our perspective will always follow our state. And so I was having this conversation with someone where she was kind of like, oh, well, do you believe like in the Bible? And I'm kind of like, well, yes and no, because it depends on a person's state when they're looking at the Bible and then interpreting that. So isn't everything that we come to look at, isn't that always going to be kind of tethered to our own state of consciousness? And if we're in Christ consciousness, then we see things in a certain way. Like there's like seeing through the eyes of love or the lens of love. And if we're in survival or in that instinct place, then we might actually see things through the eyes of victimization or fear or scarcity. And so I think it's quite easy to have the same text in front of you and to have 50 million interpretations based on the different levels of consciousness.
Well, I think polyvagal theory has ruined me. And whenever it comes to theology, faith, as I'm having like conversations with people regarding belief or unbelief,
Yeah.
I'm always analyzing like what is their autonomic nervous system needing that is causing them to believe or to not believe in this moment. And I find myself many times in conversation holding space for a person's autonomic nervous system more than their religious affiliation or choice of belief or unbelief. And I have found that whenever I do that, it provides more space for me to show up as who I am. And there's times where the conversation allows space for me to share tidbits of what I find to believe, find to believe to be beautiful and true. And there's other times that I know that if I were to share that, that would be the most detrimental thing I could share with that person. So the best thing that I can do is just be a human being in their presence and love them.
I love that, because really what you're saying is it's like you are there's this quote, and I forget, I don't know if it was St. Francis of Assisi or who it was. I'm forgetting, but he said, wherever you go, preach the gospel. Whenever necessary, use words. And it's like, don't need to like have to agree on faith or the way that God shows up. But it's like, if I'm actually existing in that place of Christ consciousness, loving as Christ did, then it's like, I'm just here being a human with you and loving you no matter what. And like, you don't need to be right about religion. I don't need to be right. Like, we don't even have to talk about that. Like, let's be together. Like, let's connect. Like, I would love to see you through the eyes of love and support you as a fellow human, like as a fellow creation of God, and like perfectly imperfect human.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
John, when you said you were ruined by polyvagal theory, it reminded me that I was watching this Gabor Mate lecture today, and he said that in a lot of ways that the nervous system, emotional system mirrors your immune system in the way that it operates, right? And so like here you are, you've been ruined by polyvagal theory, but so it just as a framework as to see the world. Whereas a lot of people probably, and I know that like a lot of people in my family for sure, see the world through a religious lens. Like everything is seen through that lens. And so they've built their whole experience through that. And so it's like, you can receive somebody's story, even though like you're framing it in your own mind in your own way and seeing it through maybe more of a biological lens. I just think that that's interesting and also cool, and also like a way to kind of it depersonalizes it a little bit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think everyone should like get a copy, like if they're a Christian, like they have a copy of the Bible and they have a copy of like Deb Dana and Stephen Porges, like the polyvagal theory, like
somebody needs to do the mashup.
system, like that's still God's property, like the body.
I would be definitely. There's this. I've connected with the group that I really want to attend. It's like a Catholic contemplative support. They have classes, but I think it's called the Companioning Center, and they offer classes that is the intersection of polyvagal theory and faith, and I'm hoping to take that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's so nice. Nick's brother actually has
Yeah, I'll share it with him. He's been doing parts work for a long time, but he's he's a therapy head too. He's a nerd, so he likes all that stuff.
Awesome.
It's amazing. I just think it opens up so much when we're open to, I think, going on the journey. I guess if you look through like a spiritual or religious lens of the journey, or like the purpose that we're here for, if we're able to be open, then it's like there's so much love here. Like there's so much more here to like meet people where they're at, and to kind of smooth out the rough edges of this othering or adversarial stuff that we can do when we're trying to fight for territory or of being right. Like, I'm the one who's right, I'm getting into heaven and you're not, unless you believe what I do.
So the thing I always want to ask people is, what is it within you that is causing you to have such a need to be right all the time? Because that is an autonomic nervous response that sends them into flight or fight. They fight to be right. What is causing that?
Yeah.
And if you were wrong, would you be okay?
It's just pure righteousness, John. That's what it is.
Like safety, right? Safety and being right, because there's so little to grab onto in our human experience. Like all of this is changing and fleeting. So it's like, well, if I'm wrong about my beliefs or opinions, then what do I have to hold on to? And then you could really send someone down the rabbit hole. But like, that could be an amazing.
Where would you end up?
Right. That could be an amazing experience if you would just let go and let God, eh?
Well, there's so much growth whenever you're wrong and you learn something new. Every time I have grown, it's because I've been wrong about something.
Yeah.
I love being wrong. I'm like, oh wow, this is better actually that I'm wrong. Yeah, way better. Because me being right didn't really leave a lot of room for any new learning or excitement. Like being wrong is actually a bit more fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
John, we've chewed up a bunch of your time. I want to really thank you for spending time with us and shooting the breeze. I was on your Instagram page. You do a nice job making these cards. So congrats on that. Do you have anything that you like to share? Like, do you have socials or like an organization that you do, or what, or if you're anonymous, that's fine too.
Yeah, no, you're welcome to follow me on Instagram at the.john.eli. I actually just I got on Threads today. I've been laying low from Instagram for the past about a month and a half, and honestly, I've just been working on taking care of my body and my own emotional and mental health as well. That had been severely neglected over the past few years. So I probably will be jumping back here shortly and trying to share with the world the amazing things that I've learned from others on my mental health journey. And also, I always post a lot of different mental health quotes and information about trauma and trauma recovery. But you're welcome to join the journey. I've been on a leave of absence for a little bit.
Well, I'm really excited to see what you come up with next and what you share next, because you've got such a gift. And you, like, the one thing that always stood out about you to me is just like your sense of compassion and how big your heart is. And so, I really love you. I'm so glad that we met, and you're such a kindred spirit. Yeah.
Love you too, my friend. Appreciate you a ton.
All right. So Emotional 35, John Eli. And that is a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming.